I'm Sharon Barnes-Waters, and welcome to City Views, the show about people, places, and things that make New York great. Well, I'm continuing my series about the boroughs, what's happening there, what initiatives that's going on, and we're speaking to each borough president, of course, who can address those issues, and either one business owner or an organization that is contributing to the health and the welfare and making that borough thrive. So today, we go to Brooklyn, the borough I was raised in, so you know I'm really proud. And we have Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams with us today, and Colvin Grannum. And I want to get this right. You're the president and CEO of Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation.
That's it.
Welcome to City Views, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric, you were born and raised in Brownsville. You have been a police officer, a state senator, and now you are the borough president to 2.6 million people thereabout. You've always had Brooklyn at your heart. Why is that? Was there something about you growing up that you were like, I think I can contribute greatly to this borough?
That's so true. And I recall reading a book as a child called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And that remained impactful to me for so many years. And I realized that it really was a metaphor for families growing in Brooklyn, communities growing in Brooklyn, and businesses growing in Brooklyn. And I'm just happy that as you brought in someone with me on this show, couldn't have been a better person than Colvin. You know, what he is doing in Bed-Stuy Restoration Plaza, I like to use the analogy of a marquee player when you want to rebuild a team. But Brooklyn was always a good brand, but the team wasn't built correctly. So you need that marquee player to build a team around. This is the LeBron James of you know, building communities. And Bed-Stuy Restoration has partnered with us. We allocated a substantial amount of capital dollars there. And so Brooklyn is in my heart, and it's in the heart of many of the residents.
You're an advocate. It's almost like you're this advocate for Brooklyn, you know, bringing people together.
Long legacy of that. I mean, Marty Market was the same, you know, and so it's a continuation of doing that.
Because, you know, New York is this melting pot, but in Brooklyn, it's a melting pot of the melting pot.
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
Grew up there. I know that your parents are from the islands, and my parents are from the islands, and I'm an immigrant, and you were born in Brooklyn, so it's the melting pot within the melting pot.
Without a doubt.
Right, and I'm going to ask you, since he brought in, tell me exactly how long has this been in existence, and tell me some of the programs that you offer, Colvin.
This is our 50th anniversary, so we're really excited to be here on our 50th anniversary, and it grew out of a love for Brooklyn. And what is the interesting thing about restoration is that it's recognized as the nation's first community development. It was a corporation designed to rebuild communities. And the interesting thing about it is that when Bobby Kennedy, Senator Bobby Kennedy and Senator Jacob Javits were looking for a place to start this experiment on rebuilding what you might call inner city communities, they looked at Harlem and they looked at Bed-Stuy. And the reason they chose Bed-Stuy was because Bed-Stuy actually had more homeowners. And and the thought was that you could build something on people, that was an excellent platform on which to build an organization that was trying to revitalize communities, because people who own homes have such a deeply invested interest in making sure that the place is rebuilt and vibrant. So the programs we have, well, we really try to focus on the gaps between communities like Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, et cetera, and the rest of Brooklyn or the rest of New York City. So you know there's a gap in income. There's a gap in assets, like how much the net worth of people is. There's a health gap. We were just talking about that. There's more diabetes. There's more hypertension. There's an access to art and culture gap, literally. That's right. There's not as many cultural organizations. And so those are some of the things where we targeted our programs. So we have an economic solutions center that serves about 8,000 people a year. And what we try to focus on there is helping people increase their income and increase their net worth. We help them get into the labor market. We help them build careers. We help them clean up their credit. We help them save. And that's all about more income and more assets. And one of the interesting things about assets, and I'm not talking about millions of dollars, but low and moderate income people who save The evidence is that they have better educational attainment,
Right.
longer persistence in the workforce, and just greater resilience overall, right, through economic hardship. Arts and culture, that's something we've been doing for 50 years. We have a Billie Holiday Theater. I don't know if you've heard of the Billie Holiday Theater. Billie Holiday Theater has been in existence over 40 years. And we have, and that's
just a little microscope of what you're doing.
That's right, but
the
the kinds of actors that have appeared in the Billie Holiday Theater, Ruby Dee, Ossie Davis, Lawrence Fishburne. So, and today we have actors coming back, people who have won Tony Awards and other noted actors, because they're committed to preserving the arts and culture of people of African descent in an environment that we could call a gentrifying environment, where oftentimes in those environments, the arts and culture of the people who have been there for a long time is swept away.
Right.
So,
and I'm just going to interrupt because
yes.
I'm going to switch, because you started with housing, and I'm going to go to you, Eric, about housing, because I know this is a concern, affordable housing for the borough presidents. And you are partnering with houses of worship. There's some kind of unique partnership. Can you tell me about that?
Number one issue in Brooklyn, as Colvin alluded to, the displacement and gentrification that is witnessing large number of longtime Brooklynites who are really being displaced, and the borough is becoming unaffordable, has been acknowledged as being one of the most expensive places to live in America, in the borough of Brooklyn. So we have to find creative ways of ensuring that long-term residents and the children. My son graduated from college. He wants to come and return to Brooklyn and live. It needs to be affordable. And as we maintain that, and the goal is that when you do an analysis of the borough and you look and see many property owners are church buildings. The lots that's next to them across the street, or their air rights allow them to build up. We wanted to show them how do you use the assets you have, how do you leverage those assets and develop your property, not losing your property, but developing your property to make sure that you can continue to have your parishioners. Because when gentrification not only impacts the homeowners, but it impacts those who tithe and offer. You know, when communities change and you move from that very spiritual and faith-based body of people, you also lose those church and those religious institutions.
Those connections, those people
go
that are there
down.
that help help the families.
Yes,
you know?
so true. And so that's our goal. We have a Building by Faith partnership with many of our clergy organizations and institutions to show them how to leverage their property and their land to develop and to ensure that they can hold on to it.
And as Colvin was talking about the Billie Holiday Theater, you know, King's Theater, that's come back, and that's also helped the Flatbush Avenue, that community, because it was restored. And how is that going?
My predecessor had the vision of restoring the King's Theater. The hopes was to draw people to the area. There's going to be a hotel that's going to be built there. We want to develop the Flatbush corridor and have many of those businesses learn how to move into the next century and how to hold on to your property, how to open your businesses and attract the new clientele. When people often think about gentrification, they believe that they don't fit in. But in fact, you can fit in. You know, by making your product presentable on a global aspect. 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. You know, not only Caribbean peoples like jerk chicken, you know, you don't only have to feel as though you could only have a black clientele. Make your business presentable to the diversity of the borough and be involved, you know, go out and attend and interact with other groups to be part of the evolution of change. Change is going to come.
Yeah, it's going to come.
and we got to deal with it one way or another. I like to tell people the story of a woman who spoke to me and said she eventually moved off her block because the groups changed and all the people from her group left. This wasn't an African American or Caribbean. This was a Greek woman who used to live on Washington Avenue between Pacific and Dean. That whole area was Greek at one time. it changed to become an African-American Caribbean. Brownsville used to be a place they used to call tough Jews. That was a Jewish community for a long time. All of these communities are going to evolve. Let's be part of the evolution and make sure that we can fit into the evolution.
Colvin, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to ask you, Borough President, can businesses thrive in Brooklyn? What do you say to businesses about coming to Brooklyn? Restoration Plaza, you brought in businesses there. What can you say about businesses in Brooklyn? Can they thrive? Should they come?
Oh, I think absolutely they can thrive, and there's lots of examples of thriving businesses. You know, some of the places that we point to and that we're building partnerships with are places like the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Industry City. They're doing a fantastic job of attracting manufacturing businesses and businesses that actually pay what I would call middle-income wages. Up and down the commercial corridors, I think what's important is what the borough president said, which is you have to be in tune with the population, right? You can't keep doing what you've been doing, and you can't forego customers because they don't look like the customer you used to serve. And so, you know, one of the things we do is we work with businesses as well. We have something called the Brooklyn Business Center, and that's one of the things we're trying to get people to do, constantly plan and adjust their plans, understanding that there's a lot of affluence coming to Brooklyn.
Yes.
And
it seems to be the new place.
Right. And one of the things that we have to do is, you know, people come to Brooklyn, but oftentimes they go back to Manhattan to shop or to go to the hospital or whatever because they have these patterns. And but they're there to be captured.
Yes. Yes. No, so true. And it's so important, you know, filling that gap. We must have qualified organizations to do so, because many businesses don't know how. So when you have an organization like Restoration that would actually show, here's how you take your business to the next level, so you don't have to guess, you don't have to feel intimidated and afraid. And then government must be the partner. Robbie Carnegie, who's the chair of small businesses, is doing an excellent job in some of the things that he's doing. And we want to continue to attract tourism. When you look at the number of tourists that come to the city, our goal is to attract them into the borough, not only to walk across the bridge and go back into Manhattan, but to explore some of the neighborhoods and some of the communities. We're opening a tourism center at Borough Hall where we're going to allow people to use the concept of moving throughout the borough and see our rich history. We have a home of fame like Hollywood has, you know, where we have our Barbra Streisands and Miles Davis used to live in Bed-Stuy. We want people to see the various communities and attract them to our museums, our parks, and our historical districts that are available. So businesses are coming to Brooklyn. They're thriving in Brooklyn. A lot of tech startups, creating the infrastructure, doing the bike racks and the bike lanes. One thing that Restoration is great in doing to encourage people of color to see the benefits of using bikes and alternative forms of transportation. So it is that combination of creating an environment where our city is like a recruiter. We must recruit the talent we need, and they're going to look and see, how am I going to raise my children in a good educational system? How am I going to be gainfully employed? How am I going to have access to healthy food? How am I going to be safe? And how am I going to be green space?
And that leads me to talking about healthy foods, and because you have a great story of, I think, having type 2 diabetes and changing your diet, and when we're talking about the health. So you really are taking the health of the people of your borough seriously, because you know what can happen. So what steps are you taking to provide healthier food, space, environment, housing, having more green trees, planting trees? What are you doing for the health and the welfare now of Brooklynites?
So important. Nothing could impact the family more than receiving a devastating announcement of a health issue. You know, I lost a staffer a few months ago to pancreatic cancer. I have several staffers now who are going through major health issues. And so when I was told I was type 2 diabetic, instead of saying, woe is me, I said, why not me, finding a way to reverse this. I was able to connect with some doctors who are looking at how do we redefine our health system and make the connection between food and health. And so that is the initiative that we're doing in Borough Hall. We're putting millions of dollars into building greenhouses in Marlborough projects for one, and in Canarsie, so that people can see where food grows from and actually start the process of healthy eating. We partnered with Councilperson Espinal to put in place legislation that will require a whole analysis of how do we look at green space, growing healthy food, education food in our children. We're going to do a $1 million contest with our schools to tell the schools that whoever come up with a plan from soil to plate and build a curriculum around children learning about healthy eating habits and how to grow food, we're going to allocate $1 million to that school to build them out. So we want to encourage people about health. We have a major event that we're doing on Friday, the 8th of September, where we're bringing in a doctor who reversed my diabetes. He's coming in to do a talk about the issue of health. Health is so important.
You can have everything else if you don't have your health.
It's
you can have all the money in the world.
Right,
you
right.
don't have your health.
So true, so true. And that's our focus. And our focus is to really see people how realistically you can change your health profile. We always take a physical selfie. We must take an internal selfie to find out what our bodies are going through, so we could really not live with diseases, but we can reverse diseases and prevent it. The doctor was clear. He says, Eric, you are not going to live with diabetes. You're going to reverse it. Wow. No medicine, only food.
Wow. And we saw that. We saw what happened. You had that dramatic weight loss.
Yes, yes.
And you're looking
35
good. You're looking good, Eric.
pounds.
Congratulations, Colvin. I just want to. I forgot to mention this because I do like. I'm going to go back to housing for just for 1 second before we close out, because I like what you said. I heard this is what you said. Housing is to serve people, so we need healthy neighborhoods that serve people. We need to reimagine the city.
Yeah.
So we can't always be stuck in what was.
That's right.
We have a new city, a new demographic, a new look. So tell me, what is unique and special about Brooklyn?
Well, you identified it. And, you know, both the diversity, there's diversity in people, but there's also diversity in income, right? So, you know, Brooklyn is a borough with a lot of working class people. There's a lot of people who earn $35,000, $40,000, $50,000. We got a lot of working poor people too. They get up every day and they go to work, and a lot of people in the city depend on them, but they can't afford to live here. What I was talking about there is about how we look at density versus aesthetics. So there's a big struggle in our borough about whether we should have more density or whether we should lower densities and have everything look like when it was originally designed. And what I'm saying
reimagine
is that we have to, because the housing, we should not put the aesthetic above the human condition.
The need of the people.
That's right, because it's life or death in many instances, right? And so when the people who built it, believe me, they weren't sacrificing any of their interests. And so we shouldn't be sacrificing our interests to preserve what they built for a completely different time. So I'm in favor of density. I'm in favor of density because I think the only way low and moderate income people can afford to live in this city is through higher densities. I'm also very much in favor of home ownership. And when your parents moved here, and when you grew up here, home ownership was a real opportunity for people, and it helped them move to the next level, right? And today in New York City, what we're seeing is that there's little likelihood that moderate income people can afford to buy anything in Bedford, Stuyvesant, or Crown Heights. And we've got some places like East New York and Brownsville where there may be an opportunity to reverse that or slow it. But we ought to think about the importance of home ownership on a multi-generational basis. And if we don't affect policy to do that, then we're going to end up with a lot of people who have no assets when they get old. Right, right. And that has significant socioeconomic ramifications.
So true. And then it's so important, there needs to be a pathway to home ownership. It may start out owning a condominium or co-op. The first thing I purchased was owning something and able to leverage that to purchase something else. There is no pathway. Right. And if you don't have a pathway to home ownership, you may not be able to afford. We learned from the mortgage fiasco is that many people were going beyond their means. And so you may not be able to afford your dream house, but you could afford a house that you could start the process of the pathway, cleaning your credit, learning how to save, to move to that next step. If we don't have that pathway, then many people are going to be priced out and they will never find Brooklyn affordable.
Wow.
So there's some opportunities that are practical. There are two things that we're looking at and others as well. One is called a community land trust, where you just take land out of the market, right? So it's no longer subject to the speculative nature of the market. And you can build home ownership on that. And because it's not in the market, you can kind of control the resale price. The other thing is called limited equity home ownership, where it's also an artificial construct where you buy below market as a low-income person or a moderate-income person, but you also sell below market. In between the sale, in between when you buy and when you sell, you get a return, but it won't be this crazy speculative return, right?
Right.
You're not looking to go from, well, I invested $50,000 and I want to walk away with $300,000.
Right.
It's not going to be that way, but it will allow you to get to the next step.
Right.
And what it allows is that the next family can also buy below market and it'll be affordable to them.
Wow.
And it can cycle on. So that can be a first step for a lot of people to get on the pathway to home ownership
Well,
in the
I know that a
actual
lot of people
marketplace.
will be glad to hear that.
Yeah, well,
And-
we're working on it.
And as we're wrapping up, I want to say, Colvin, Grannum, and Borough President Eric Adams, thank you for all you do for no matter where I go, no matter where I live,
You're Brooklyn.
I will always be a Brooklynite. And but the both of you are adding to the success of the borough, and I'm so pleased that it's thriving in different ways. Yes, there's always room for more improvement and more things to do. But the both of you are an example of why I love Brooklyn. And thank you for stopping by City View
Thank you.
today,
And Brooklyn
gentlemen.
loves
Thank
you.
Yay!